My name is Jeff McFeeters, and in this demonstration, I want to show how I create a series like this, taking with my Olympus OMD cameras in ProCapture mode to collect a sequence of um, images like this, and then putting them into a single file. ProCapture on low allows us to shoot as fast as 18 frames per second, and we can select a pre-capture number up to 35 frames, RAW or JPEG or RAW plus JPEG. And we can also select an overall number that we want to set as a limit if that's important, or we can set no limit. And if we're in continuous autofocus with tracking, we can hold the shutter button at half press, waiting for a takeoff to happen. And once it happens, we can then press the shutter fully to release it. And if we choose, we can keep it pressed and follow the subject for as long as we wish, or until they're out of range or something like that. And so in this case, what I did is I used an Olympus OMD EM1X and a 12 to 100 millimeter f4 Pro zoom. I was at 100 millimeters, and the red-winged blackbirds were out and doing their thing towards sunset. And so I'm backlit here, and I just framed the blackbird in the viewfinder, probably in the center, and I had all points in this selected because at this point there is only there's no distracting material close to the bird, so it will select the bird and it will keep the bird in focus as I move with the bird because the background is far enough away that it's very much out of focus. If it were with something closer to the bird behind it, I would have selected probably 5 or 9 points in the center and tried to stay with the bird in the center to keep it in focus. I probably would have lowered sensitivity to -1 or -2 in such a situation, so that if I didn't keep the bird perfectly within the focus points at all times, but I could keep it there pretty easily, then if it drifted out just for a second or two, partial second, it wouldn't quickly shift focus to something else or try to find focus somewhere else. It would slow down the responsiveness of the autofocus. So that's kind of how I would normally approach something like this. Anyway, when I get back home, I would have, 20, 30, 40 frames, depending on how long I tracked the bird, and how far it flew from point to point, and how many frames per second I was shooting. With larger birds, I usually lower the frame rate down to about 10, like with eagles. But with small birds, I will usually set it at 18 frames, 15 to 18 frames per second, and because they move so quickly. Now this, you'll see, does include nearly every frame except 1 or 2 at the beginning. And so we'll see how that goes. So how would I do this? How would I get all these shots, once taken individually, into a sequence like this? Let's see how we do that. CC 2020, and I've imported 22 files, DNG files from Lightroom. Now, just as a brief introduction here, what I would do in Lightroom is very minor pre-sharpening and overall adjustment. I would select the series from beginning to end in Lightroom, and in the library module, I would go to the photo menu, slide down to develop. With the one exposure that I like the best as an average, as the one most selected of the group, I would then slide over the develop module to the submenu and pick the match total exposures, which is at the bottom of that submenu. There's a shortcut to that, but that makes all the images kind of equivalent in their exposure, so that when you bring them all in here, they have a very similar look, tone, color, all that. And that's kind of important for what we're going to do here. So I would take all these layers into Photoshop, and it's going to put it's going to put them in order from first to last from when you took them, but I want this to be in reverse order. So I really want the latest one, the ending shot at the top, and the first shot at the bottom. So just when you bring them all in, you can just select the top one, shift, select the bottom, and then under layer, arrange, and reverse. And that'll put them in reverse order. And since they're all selected, then I will come up here and go to the edit, auto align layers. And I usually just select auto and don't do anything else and see what happens. So that is my, the first thing to do is get them all aligned in some sort of like a panorama. And because I did track with the bird, it's going to kind of arrange all the images looking at the overall scene, and the bird will be moving through them. Now, when you look at this, you don't see that at first. You can see over here on the left with my layers, see how the images are kind of sliding in this overall rectangle. To get everything, I guess it already is. It did that automatically for me. Good. I thought I would have to go up and tell it to reveal everything, but it did it automatically. So here I have the first one, and then all the way to the end. You can kind of see the frames here. The next thing I'm going to do is select each frame and crop, create a mask for the bird. And then I will only need probably something in the middle here, and probably, I won't need all these frames in the background, okay? So this is just a kind of a tedious thing, but I go through each frame and select the bird using the quick selection tool up here, the object selection tool, and I usually just pick rectangle and just select that layer, come in here and draw a square around it, let it select it, and click the mask to add a mask. And it doesn't have to be perfect on each one because we can brush in anything that was left out. Since we're going to be adding the layer, and the layer, the background is pretty much the same for all these, it's going to be a lot easier. So I can just go through here one at a time and draw a rectangle, and oops, have to select the layer. It's kind of important. I'll draw the rectangle. And you can kind of see if you got everything, and then make a mask there. And turn on the next layer and select it, and so forth. I'll skip ahead here so you don't have to watch me do every one of these as we go. And created a mask on each layer. So now I want, before I pull in the background, I want to make sure I do want every one of these stages of the bird's flight. And when I kind of come in here to this area here, now just as a note here, because this bird took off from branches, when we bring the background back in, there's probably going to be some cloning and maybe some tricky things. So it's going to vary in terms of what you find when you do things like this. The simpler the foreground and background, the easier it is to do this, and the more complicated it is with branches and sticks and twigs and grass and stuff like that, then you have some little playing around to do, but it's not terrible, and I think the results and what you get from it is worth the exercise. But anyway, when I look at these, some of these frames, if I come over to the layers and turn off some, that there's hardly any of the bird there, and it's kind of cluttering up this nice view here. In fact, this bird and this bird. So maybe I really don't want on each side there. I think I'll keep that, but you could, to keep it really simple, you could come through here and just kind of maybe do every other one. And you would find it, might be, in, for your mind, as good, if not not better. To do something like that. But since I did keep pretty much everything, I'm gonna show you how I do this the way I did it. So once you've figured that out, that kind of saves some things. You could just, we can simplify this and select those layers and just delete them. We don't need them on the file. This area here needs to be fixed. If I turn off, shift click on these two masks and turn them off, I can see the tree, how far the twig moved. The background's not shifting much, but obviously that little branch area, that small willow, moved quite a bit. So the Photoshop aligned, the main background more than it worried about this thing here. But I think since I'm masking in, I don't have to use, the first background. And if I kind of go through here and just look at how it doesn't move much in these last two. So I'm guessing that if I use this as my background, that might give me a good blend of how to fix this issue. I think it doesn't look like that branch moves much between that one and that one. So I think what I will do here is take this layer and move it down a little bit so I can just enough so I can see this layer below. I'll select this layer, press the V key as the move tool, and move this over. Kind of line it up. It doesn't have to be exact, just to see kind of where I'm at with this bird. If I hit the Z, I can zoom in a little bit. And yeah, I need to move this probably, get it lined up where I can see its head and its feet. So I'll need to rotate this. And I think if I hit Command T, yeah, I can rotate and grab this. Let's get it down here where we can bring it up. And see how I'll see the head a little bit, and a little bit of that red wing. The beak is a little behind, and kind of line up the sticks. Just about like that. Go in here and see what we've got here. We press enter, let it accept that it's got the right orientation, and I can drop this down a little bit, and I think once this is masked, remasked, I think it'll look pretty good. We can try it. So what I do here, turn this back off and bring the, yeah, I think that's going to work. What do you think? You can slide this over a little bit like that. That looks really pretty good, don't you think? And you can click over here and just kind of hold the mouse down and bring these all back up. And I think that is kind of nice. It's actually better than my first one. All right, so we've got that adjusted. Now let's go over here to these last two frames and see if there's something that happened here similar to that we can adjust. Let's take this one and drop it down. Yeah, it just moved enough. It's not very bad. If I put this down and take this one, yeah, that's not. Yeah, this is great. So here again, we see something pretty simple to fix without having to do it. This will save us time later. So we see this little alignment issue because the background is going to be really easy to blend in, and we're not using necessarily either of these. We might be using the background from down here. I'll show you how we figure that out in a minute. So this one again, I can take this and bring this up. And part of the reason it's fatter is because it was moving during the shot, but I think that's pretty good. I think that's going to be pretty good. Let's see here. Once we're ready to paint back in some background, which for obvious reasons would be very simple if the entire series happened without moving the camera. You didn't need to pan the camera. And there are quite a few situations where that will occur, and that will make this a lot easier. But this is a more difficult challenge because the bird is moving outside of the original composition, and I want to include all of this. So I panned with the camera, and as you've seen, and we've had to create this panorama by overlapping these layers together. And now we don't need every layer. We just need certainly we decided we need this one and maybe this one down here. And then we need something in the middle. Hopefully one that the tonal qualities will be very similar to these for overlapping. So if I select this layer here and paint with a white brush, that would be painting it back in. And the same thing on this layer down here. I could paint that layer back in, and any of these in here I can paint back in. I don't want to paint over any of the birds, so I have to select each bird again, going through each layer with Command Shift to add all the layers together to create one big layer. And that's selected the birds. I need to invert that so that I'm actually protecting the birds and selecting the background. So Command Shift I will invert this selection. Now if I pick this top layer, brush, 100%, I can paint that in. And if I select this layer, paint that in. And let's see. This doesn't have much of an overlap, but it will have to do. We'll see if we can make it work. It's pretty close here, so I don't think it will take much feathering. So let's try that. We'll select this mask and paint that in. Now it'll be real easy to feather this much. We can just put this layer and we'll select the gradient mask, and we make sure we have, like black to white or something like that. And then if we start the black will be hiding and white will be revealing. If we start inside here with the black brush and we move this way, but not all the way past that, that should make a pretty gradual mask through here, which it did. We'll need to clone out some stuff here, and I might actually might be better if I started back in here. See what happens if I make it a little bit more. I think that's a little better. Okay. Now here, oops, I need to select that top layer that I want to feather. If I go up here and just not bad. Okay. All right. So now we've got our background, and I think it would be pretty easy to use the clone stamp if we needed to brush anything. But I think even though you see it here, I think when we're cropped, it would be very hard to notice. These are overlapping. I don't think that will be the main focus. That could be adjusted easily enough with some dodging and burning if we needed to. So that's that. Let's go to the history and a new snapshot. We'll call this background added, and OK. All right, now we're ready for the final tweaks. Background added, and that's the part that is selected to add, or we can add back in any pieces from our original frames that were accidentally cut out because our selection was a little bit too aggressive. That's usually what happens. When we select a subject, it doesn't oftentimes get everything. It might miss little tips of wings and stuff. So the way to do that is I'll start up here and I'll option click on the layer, this layer here, and then so I have this layer selected, and you see we can still see where the rest of the birds are, and we're not going to accidentally, by brushing in some background here, we won't be able to brush in anything that would hide those other birds, the same bird, but the other frame. So if I shift click here, I can kind of go back and forth, and I can see that some of the tail feather was lost. So with white selected as a brush, we can come in here with a smaller brush and then just paint, select the mask and paint back in that little piece. And if you want, you can just kind of just carefully go around the bird to make sure that we've got the little edges. And then we can option click the next one and do the same thing. Just select the mask and kind of just come in here. See, there's a little bit of the wing feathers here that we're missing, a little tip there, just a little bit of the tip. Maybe some of the feet here weren't quite brought in. Some of that beak was left out. So this gets just a little cleaner feather. And just keep going through each layer like this. And we just double check to make sure that we kind of got all the little edges. That's hard for these to catch. Just kind of just gradually. If you want to zoom in a little bit, you can do that. You can see here that there's some blurring on the wings from moving, and this can kind of get a little bit of that realism brought back in, so it doesn't look quite so sharp, or it wouldn't look that sharp, some of the edges. Again, option click, select the mask, and this missed some of this here. And once we bring everything back in, we can double check to make sure we're not seeing any kind of haloing or something that was unusual with the background, but this will usually work pretty well. That little bit of claw down there. That's pretty good. A little bit in here was, I'm careful here where it's going over. I don't worry too much if there's another bird behind it. I'm mainly concerned about edges that are out in the background. I want it to look like the bird is in that space here. That's where I'm really concerned. I don't want to bring in the background behind this bird to be over that bird. So it's protected, so it shouldn't. But you know, that's just the idea here, is kind of get that background brought back in. And yeah, see, we missed quite a bit here. And then tips here. This is important. This is what, not that this is something I would print probably, but you know, this is kind of the practice I do to make sure when I do get something really good that I've had the discipline to kind of know what to look for when I'm working on things like this. Again, remember the Shift or Command H will turn off the marching ants if you're, but I want to see right now what I'm doing, so I leave them on. Getting close to the end here. It's pretty good. I think we're just about done. Might be some tips here. Yep. I don't want to go that far out. Okay, and now this one is part of a big background brush, but because we painted in the background, we really got everything with this one. And I had to do some tweaking, remember, on that one. So I think we should be, see how it looks. Should have a pretty good view here now. Don't you think? And that's really, now we've really pretty well got it. I might, just to be safe, before I do anything, I might do another snapshot and put pre-crop final and take a look at it. Let's see if we can do a 3:1 crop. Basic panorama. That in. Leave a border here. Have it kind of centered in this section like this. Okay. Final crop. We've got a little bit down here to work on. We've got some cloning out, things like that. We can make it a tighter crop. So that should do it.